questions. So the topic is the data protection challenges of hybrid working. I want to just thank you for everybody that gave me some insight in terms of what you felt was the biggest challenge of hybrid working. So I've got examples of keeping data secure, recording telephone calls, the use of personal devices and confidential waste. We've got subjects such as having sensitive paperwork at home, leaving laptops on or using them for other household members. And then there's the feeling of disconnect between the home and the workplace. Before I kick off, is there anything in particular, other than what I've just said that you guys have shared with me, that you want me to cover today, or what you see as the challenge that is facing you with hybrid working? Feel free to type in the chat bot. If not, I will purely kick off. So, for those of you that don't know me, my name is Kellie Peters. I'm the co-founder of Databasix, and I'm a little bit passionate when it comes to data protection, in particular about providing practical advice to colleagues, people in my network, and our clients. And hopefully that will come across in today's session. What I'd ask you to do is, if there are questions that come up today, please do use the chat box, type them in, and I'll try and answer them as we go. But like I said, there will be an opportunity to ask questions at the end. So as it should be no surprise to anybody that has listened to me before, I am a data nerd. Therefore, I always like to start off with a few statistics that have come out. So PricewaterhouseCoopers produced a survey last year, and they looked at UK CEOs and found that large majorities expect the enduring shift towards remote collaboration, automation, and low density workplaces. And the option of hybrid working is one that is appealing to many organisations. So my question to everybody here is, are you so I've got three questions. Are you going to move fully back to the office? Are you going to continue to be purely remote working, or are you going to be adopting a hybrid way of working? So if you could just use the chat box to let me know, are you as an organisation shifting towards hybrid working? Excellent. Excellent. And I think there are quite a lot of people that just don't know at the moment. I think there are some that are going to trial it, and some that are this is the future for us. So no, that's good to know. So thank you very much. So the other thing that surveys have said is that the International Data Corporation, which is a massive American-based organisation that does market research, stated that at least 70% of digitally enabled small, medium-sized businesses, which in the UK, and I appreciate that I've got some non-UK based companies on today's webinar, that 90% of the economy is driven by small, medium-sized businesses, but 70% of those say that they will operate under a hybrid model. Though I wonder how long that will last. And I've been very intrigued by what the comments are in the chat box, in that there is a bit of a trialing that is going on. So let's really talk about some of what I see as some of the challenges from a data protection perspective that I feel that you may be being faced with or have been faced with over the last 18 months. So one of the points that I see a lot when I talk to clients is when I talk to them about the technology that they are using, is that there are instances where the technology that they have, like the PCs or the laptops, are not the most up to date. Some are still running old versions of Windows, and that actually knowing the versions of software that are out there on your workforce's technology sometimes can be quite a challenge, and has become much more of a challenge since the pandemic. So the challenge is, what is the current state of the technology that you and your staff are using to be able to connect remotely or reconnect to the network at the office in these hybrid working times? Do you know that? Do you know where you stand when it comes to technology? And do you have the budget to be able to upgrade your systems? And the reason I talk about technology being a challenge is that with some of the latest digital technology in terms of collaborative tools, some older versions are being phased out. So an example is Microsoft are phasing out Internet Explorer. It's being replaced with their new browser, which is called Edge. And some of the technology that's now being launched that's allowing us all to connect together will simply not run on Internet Explorer. So do you know across your organization what are the different versions of software that you have? And is it preventing your staff connecting and working whilst at home, or when they move back into the office? And then if you are looking to move towards a more hybrid model, some of the challenges some of the clients I have seen is that because they've had technological problems, their staff have started to use their own devices to connect to the network. So then you've now got this mix of work laptop, work PC, possibly a personal mobile, a personal computer, trying to connect. So that does pose security questions and challenges for us in data protection. So if from a budgetary perspective, do you know where you stand when it comes to investing and upgrading the systems that you have in place? And do you even know just how many systems are in use by your organization? You might be heading up the privacy team. You might be responsible for operations. You may, in fact, be the owner of the business. So do you know what your level of investment is going to be for the next 12 months to be able to support this hybrid way of working? And the other thing that with the new way forward is this introducing new technology to improve employee productivity. So I'm sure you may have seen that there have been lots of let's get my teeth in. A lot of statistics have supported the fact that staff feel that they can do a lot more whilst they're at home. We'll tackle the isolation in a moment, but people feel that they are being able to be more productive, and that organizations have had to roll out a lot of new technology to be able to support that productivity. Now, one of the challenges is the systems that you're using preventing your staff from being as productive as they could be? So do you have challenges with your computer booting up? Do you have challenges with it connecting at a reasonable enough speed via a VPN to a piece of software? What collaborative tools are you using? Do you use something like Microsoft Office 365, which has a suite of tools that allows staff to be able to connect, work together online, for example? So there are the challenges are, yes, there are lots of productivity tools out there. You may have actually fast-paced a lot of those in January, February last year. But from a data protection perspective, what I want you to consider is, have you assessed the risk of these new tools that you are introducing to allow this level of collaboration. So let's talk about some of those tools. So Slack, for example, is a communications tool. What about if you might be using Office 365? You might be using Google. You might be using a cloud-based CRM system like Salesforce, for example. And that's, you introduced it because you had to, because your staff were working remote. Now, have you assessed the risk of that from a data protection perspective? If you've got people working in different locations, does your collaborative tools support the various different locations where your staff are going to be based? Do you have sufficient licenses to be able to have staff working at home as well as in the office? So that's very technically driven challenges. Now, managing retention is something that I'm seeing a lot of clients and customers, they're the same thing, potential customers really trying to tackle. And what I mean by this is that because some organizations don't know where their data is actually being stored, whether it's being printed off at home in paper copies on a desk and stored in a filing cabinet, whether it is being stored on local drives, whether they be work computers or personal computers, or it's being stored in a SharePoint system, for example, or a Google Drive, managing those retention schedules has become a real challenge. How do you tell your disparate workforce that those that have been recruiting, say, let's take HR as an example, you're going through a massive growth phase, you're recruiting massively, all of your recruitment panels are scattered, and that's likely to be the case. You may be sharing CVs across email rather than just accessing it via SharePoint. If you only have to keep CVs for unsuccessful candidates for up to 6 months, how do you trigger a message to that recruitment panel that after 6 months they need to delete that data? How do you manage the messages to the staff, whether they be at home or in the office, about actually we need to review finance files, HR files, marketing records, sales details? Because if you no longer need the data, why are you storing the information? I'm sure everybody on here can give me a very clear justification as to why they want to hold data forever. But if we remember, the law doesn't say that. So the GDPR requires us to only keep personal identifiable data for a reasonable period of time. So the challenge is going to be continuing to manage that retention of data. It's going to be the geographical locations of that data storage, to be honest. Do you store data on servers in the US? Do you store data in the UK? Do you store physical copies of records? And do you know and have you mapped out where you do need paper? And I'm sure there's still some justification for having paper records. If you do require to have paper records, do you know where they're all stored? And have you given guidance to staff about how they can transfer those records from home to the office and back home again if they need to continue to have a paper record? And again, think about, if you're going to be introducing new technology now because you've made the decision that hybrid working is the way to go, do you know where in the world you are going to be storing centrally your data? And it's a key question when it comes to data transfers. Do you know how many different platforms are being used? Now, one of the questions that we pose to clients, and not everyone takes us up on it, is we can do staff surveys, and we do. This is what your information asset register tells us in terms of the systems that you have in use. This is what your policies are telling us that are in use. And then when we go out to the staff and say anonymously, can you please tell us where do you store data? How do you store data? What systems are you using? We find that there has suddenly been an introduction of a number of new systems the teams have made the decision to download and use, yet operations and privacy managers haven't been told that, nor have IT. So do you know just how many different digital platforms your staff are using, and has that increased because of the remote working, and are there benefits to using those now in this new hybrid way of working or not? So do think about, the locations of your data and the different systems that you have, and have you risk assessed those? So I've got a question for you, so I can rest my voice for a moment. Um, if collaborative tools are not in use, so like Slack, Office 365, Google, for example, how confident are you that you are working on the latest version of documentation? So I'll give you an example before I ask you to answer this. You've got a proposal that is going out that you're going to be submitting to a client. There are 4 different team members using that. How do you know that you've got the right version of that document before you submit it to the client, and where's that being stored? So if you are so the question is, if collaborative tools are not in use, how confident are you that you're working on the latest version of documentation? Are you confident? Have you introduced collaborative tools? Excellent. Excellent. Office 365. Good. And are you finding that those collaborative tools have helped you in terms of having the latest version of documentation and the latest version of client information that is relevant for conversations? Good, good. I know that some people have love-hate for whole different ranges of collaborative tools, but for me, I think one of the benefits of collaborative tools is that it should mean that data is stored in a central location. You can provide appropriate access to that document, and you've got good version control. So from someone that is very keen on data protection and records management, you are limited in the number of places that you are storing data. You are restricting who has access to that. You know that you have the most current up-to-date documentation. And then when it comes to things like retention, you know exactly what documents that you can and cannot get rid of. Excellent. So it's good to see that you are very confident about that, because I think these collaborative tools are the way to go, especially with the fact that staff will be working between multiple locations. And let's remember that because people can now work on the move, it's not just between the office and the home, it's between the office, a client site particular, or a supplier, or a potential customer, and the office. So a collaborative tool doesn't mean that you have to store data locally. It allows you to have one version, and I'm a big fan of that. Now, this is a news story. You might not be able to read the super small writing, but I wanted to share this because the reason I'm a very proactive collaborative tools is because when they do not exist, you tend to have people introducing workarounds. And that has definitely been the case over the last 18 months and before so. But this example is a news article that hit the press this week. It was about a solicitor who used a USB stick. Note, it's unencrypted. None of the documentation on that USB stick had a password on it. There was approximately 1,400 documents that contained information about children. It included information about cases. It introduced information that had information about criminal elements. Now, this USB stick was lost on a street last year, and it only became apparent this year that the data stick had been found. The member of the public had found the data stick, plugged it in. I highly recommend that if you ever find a USB stick, do not plug it into your computer. Alas, this happened. And the firm was rebuked, the individual was rebuked, and the individual got charged by the solicitor's regulatory authority just under £300. Now, from a data protection perspective, there are a number of things to consider. Why was there the need to have a USB stick taking data from one location to another location? And these are some of the things you now need to be thinking about when you are moving between different offices or different locations. Does it need to be physically transferred on a USB stick? The answer to this should have been no. And if it was a yes, it should have been on an encrypted USB stick. So if it was found that data was rubbish because someone couldn't actually access the data. Now, the repercussions of this is that the solicitor has been rebuked. The name of the law firm has gone into the press, and those individuals who have been affected on these records could now also put in a complaint to the law firm about the misuse of their data, and they could put in a complaint of up to £3,000 per person. So this very simple error has caused quite significant repercussions. So when we're thinking about moving data from locations, really consider, is that possible? Do you know if your staff are doing that? How often does it happen? And do they know that you might have a collaborative tool that prevents them having to use a USB stick? Then obviously some of the other challenges that we are seeing is that where people have been working from home, there has been a huge increase in phishing scams, malware attacks. So where you are now going to be moving between home and the office, how do you make sure that all of your technology has the latest antivirus software? How are you making sure that people are aware of the latest scams that are going on, for example? Do your staff know, if they're at home or at the office, who they need to talk to if something goes badly wrong? So do they know who the data protection officer is, the data protection lead, the privacy officer, whoever is leading on data protection? If something goes wrong, now that you're moving to this different way of working, do they know who to contact? And did they know before? I've already talked about transferring data between the office and the home, but I would really ask you to now think about, if you know that you've got people moving from different locations, what is the type of data that they could be transferring in electronic or paper form from home to the office? And is that really necessary? Now, the other thing I've put on here is because I don't want to assume that everybody's moving back to an office that they have rented or that they may own, for example. Some of you may be considering co-working spaces as a way of working away from home, but in a space surrounded with a bit more buzz, and it feels a bit more lively, and you're not feeling as isolated. Now, there are many challenges with co-working space in that, are you providing guidance to your staff about how to store data in that co-working space? Are you providing guidance to make sure that they don't leave screens on when they walk away to make a coffee? Are you making guidance about what they do with paperwork? It's stowed away at the end of the day. What are the risks of other organizations walking past and picking up or seeing very confidential, business critical, as well as personal data? And I think there's a lot of benefits of co-working space. I think that there's it can end up being financially more viable for you, but I think you have to risk assess the space that you are going to be in. So I would want to look at what is the path from the door past your office to a meeting room, for example. Is there going to be a lot of traffic of people walking past? If that is the case, if you look at your desk space, what are the risks around that desk? What are the risks around confidential conversations being overheard in a co-working space? Should you be thinking about advising staff where they need to have a recruitment conversation, a very confidential client conversation, not just to have a headphone on, but maybe can they book a meeting room space in that co-working office? So really risk assess the space that you're going to be using. And I definitely wouldn't want anything to be left when the desk is unattended, for example. So for me, think about the risks associated with that, because it's very different from an office that you can lock. The co-working space may be open. And you may not be having a permanent desk. You might just be working in and out. So think about the risks. Now, the other news story I wanted to share about, and this reiterates the movement of data. In this time, we're talking about paper records. There were highly classified paper records, soggy paper records, because it was Kent and it was wet. They were found at a bus stop. Now, this data on those files happened to contain classified movements of naval vessels. For example, as you can see, they included emails, PowerPoint presentations, and from named individuals within the MOD. Now, I don't know how they ended up at the back of a bus stop, or how someone forgot to pick them up to get on the bus, but it happens. I have seen people get up from a train and leave paper records on their table whilst they go to the bathroom, or they simply forget that they've left them behind and they get off the train or the bus. So again, just remember, if people are now, they've got out of the routine of going from home to the office, try to provide some very simple, practical advice to your staff about when they're on the move. What should they be thinking about? Check before you leave your seat. Make sure you don't leave any papers on the top of your car, for example. What are the ways that you can reduce the risk that data gets lost in transit from the office to home? So I've seen this a lot when I've been doing audits over the last 6 months, that employees, without their employer's knowledge, are using their own devices as workarounds to access the network. So are your employees using a combination of laptop, PC, mobile devices, and possibly their own devices in your organization? I can see some typing, so I'm going to let that continue. But I know, having worked with a couple of long-term clients, I had a conversation with an IT director a couple of weeks ago, and though we'd produced the policies and we had given communication to staff, we were still surprised to find out that some of the newer staff, because they couldn't get a laptop out to them quick enough, had started to use their own personal device. So we had to go back and do an audit of all the technology to find out how people were accessing the network. Good. And it's a very good point that's been made here about a bring your own device policy. If you support bring your own device, whether it be a laptop, a mobile phone, an iPad, or whatever the equivalents to an iPad are, I'm an iPad person. If you allow it, how do you manage the bring your own device situation in your organization? Do you prohibit what they can access when they access the network? Do you let only bring your own devices connect to a guest Wi-Fi network? Do you, if they are going to be using their own personal devices, such as a laptop, are you providing them with the latest version of an antivirus software so that you know that at least their computer is protected, for example? If laptops may be company issued, which is fantastic, And it's good to see that people can only access the VPN via a work laptop. But I would always ask the question, how are people connected? If you know, or you've heard grumblings that staff are uncertain about their current technology, and that it's not working as well as it should do, what are the workarounds that they are introducing? And I would definitely consider doing a check on that, because like I said, I was genuinely surprised when I ended up having this conversation to say, we're talking about a relatively new company. There should be no reason why people are using their own laptops to access work materials. The other thing to consider as well, or if people are going to continue to work from home, is who else can access that laptop. So if this is a work laptop, do you know if your staff are allowing anyone else in the home to access that computer, and how does that compromise your business? So that's a lot of the challenges. I think the future is distributed workplace. I think that we have to be thinking about reimagining the office space. I think different organizations are going to have different approaches to managing their data and managing their workflow. I think without doubt there will be more people wanting to at least continue to try working from home, because they're now able to factor in more social elements around the evening rather than having to commute for a certain number of hours. The challenges we need to make sure is that if we are going to be supporting a distributed workplace, we need to make sure that we understand all the associated risks with that network and with those systems, and that we have put in place the appropriate contingencies. And I've got an example here. 4 professionals share a house in London, and you may have staff that are in shared home space, all work for different companies and yet share the same space, internet connections. Therefore, clear policies to staff who are going to work from home and work from the office are critical. What advice and guidance are you going to be giving to your staff and continue to give to your staff about their working environment, whether it be at home or whether it be in the office? And how do you continue to reinforce that? Because whilst you might have a policy, how do you work with your staff so they really understand what that policy means to them? So this is just a statement. If you don't have clear standardized approach to data protection, are you hemorrhaging capital? So are you spending a lot of money on a lot of different systems to plug a lot of gaps, when actually if you took a review of your data protection framework, you might actually be able to save yourself some pennies? So it's just a question to think about and stuff. I can see some typing going on. So what are my recommendations? Whilst I'll see some typing, I'll come back to it. So my recommendations really are collaborative tools are a good way forward. So what I would like you to consider is reviewing and updating your register of process and activities. Now, you might refer to this as an information asset register. You might have this as a spreadsheet. You might have a database or a system that tells you all the different processing of personal data that you have, and most importantly, the systems that are used to collect that data and where that data is stored. The reason it's important is because you want to make sure that you are absolutely aware of all the most up-to-date systems that are in use, and that you or whoever's responsible for data protection in your organization has done the appropriate risk assessments on those systems. So I don't want to be the bearer of bad news, and there may be some truly fantastic tools out there. However, if they cannot demonstrate that those systems are robust from a data protection perspective, I would urge you not to move forward with them unless you can have a conversation with the vendor about their security. From an IT perspective, have you got an actual asset register? So do you know all the different hardware that you have out there? So laptops, PCs, servers, network equipment if you are in an office. Do you know the number of USB sticks that you have issued? So review and update that, because you want to make sure that you understand the complete technical estate that you have, and importantly, how up to date are they, both from a software perspective, from an operating system, but also from a malware perspective. And if you don't know that, can IT tell you where you are in terms of your computers and how up to date they are? I'm a big person about comms. Really think about what your communication messages are going to be with your staff now that they're going to start moving around from the office to home and back. What are your data protection messages going to be about? Safe storage of data, transfer of information. If they're going to be going back to an office and actually they're not going to have a permanent desk, they might be having a desk that they can just use for the day. What guidance are you going to give them about where they can store paper records, for example? So really think about not just having the policy, but having a regular schedule of messaging that you're going to send out. Really think about that. If to be able to support the new way of working, you don't use collaborative tools at the moment, but you're going to. Have you determined whether or not you need to complete a data protection impact assessment? Now, what a data protection impact assessment allows you to do is to understand the risks of all your processing of that particular system or purpose. It allows you to understand what mitigations you can put in place, and what policies and procedures you therefore need to update. So if you're going to introduce a new HR system because you want all of your staff to be able to put in timesheets, for example, think about whether or not that new addition of new data will require you to complete a data protection impact assessment. Also think about updating your policies. So if you are now, if you do have a data protection policy, you have a home working policy maybe, do you feel that that now needs to be updated to reflect the new way of working? And when are you going to release that to the staff? So does your data protection policy cover the new flexibility that you are introducing in the workplace? And then think about, and I'm always a big fan that it should be no surprise, but think about doing an audit. It doesn't have to be every year, but think about auditing your practices when it comes to data protection, and think about asking staff what their approach is to, and doing that comparison to what staff are telling you compared to what's on the policies, and how do you get to a happy medium that allows the staff to not feel that they're being micromanaged from a data protection perspective, but making sure you feel absolutely secure in the robustness of the security of the data. So think about conducting a GDPR audit. So I've waffled on for quite a long time, actually. Are there any questions about that? So I've given you some very clear recommendations that I think should be able to help you now that you're looking to move between home and the office. I've given you an indication of some of the risks that you need to be thinking about. None of these may apply to you. You may have this all under control, and kudos to you. But I'm happy to take any questions. It has been recorded. The webinar will be made available to everybody via our website. I'm off next week, so it'll be the week after. So if there are any questions, I'm going to let you type, and then I'm just going to share with you a few fun bits about us. From September, our new Diploma in Workplace Data Protection goes live. So there are 5 modules. Each module has a CPD accreditation to it, and it covers both HR, employment law, and data protection. If you're interested, do let me know. And it's in collaboration with Silo Beyond HR. So I've got, it's possibly greater risks. I think there are, I think the point that's just been made in the chat, and I think it's a very good one, is I think where we all had to work from home, you could almost, as much as it was risky from a data protection perspective, because your remit has now expanded geographically in terms of where your staff are, they were purely based at that location. Now that you've got this now movement between home and the office and home again, I think there are risks, and I think the real risk is that movement of data. So I would really urge you to look at that movement of data, whether it be electronic or paper, and really think about how you're going to manage that, especially if staff are now coming back from furlough and they're going back to a more hybrid way of working. We can help you. We can help review policies. We can review training. We do offer a data protection officer service. We can help with audits that might be of interest. You can download our catalogue from our website if you're interested. And anyone that isn't a member, please feel free, anyone that's on here, if you'd like to be part of our best practice group, we run these several times a year. You will be part of one group. It will be 2 meetings. It's typically 2.5 hours per session, and it allows you to share any data protection questions that you have in a safe and secure place, and we will raise some topics. Okay, I'll cut. So I've got a really good question here in terms of how you would do due diligence on a system such as SharePoint, for example. So for me, what I'd be wanting to do, the considerations is how do they support you with access controls? How are you going to provide guidance to staff about creating new folders and access to that data? I'd want to know from Microsoft, where's the data going to be stored? I know you might say, well, it's Microsoft, it's in the cloud, it's going to be backed up, but what is their approach to disaster recovery? Can they point you to one of their global documents that will tell you that? How will they support you in terms of retention schedules and stuff? How can they support you with permissions to who can have access to what from a system administrator level? Can the likes of SharePoint give you the ability to remotely wipe technology from that? So that would be the kind of due diligence I'd want to be doing. And we do have a checklist. It's our data processor checklist, where any new vendor that you're looking to take on, we would say, here are some of the core questions that I'd want to have answered before I'm prepared to go forward and stuff. And obviously, if you want to talk to me about that, I'm happy to have a conversation offline. And then here's how you can keep in touch with us. All the regular channels. Yes, I will send out details about the diploma that I've mentioned. If anything is of interest of what I've covered today, feel free to email me. There will be a message that will come out after this. Email me. I'm happy to arrange a call at no obligation. Feel free to join our webinars in the future. Yeah, and I hope my rambling for 40 odd minutes has been beneficial to everybody here. Happy to take any questions if there are any. If not, I hope you all have a very, very awesome Friday, wherever you are in the world. I hope it's sunny. It's a little bit wet here in Oxfordshire. Have a good one. Any follow